The malfunction. Kelna moved through the bustling corridors of the Nexus spaceport, her head held high despite the constant whispers around her. Her prosthetic leg, a sleek piece of alien technology, once symbolized her strength and determination. But today, it betrayed her. With every step, the limb jerked unnaturally, sending sharp pain through her nerves and causing her to stumble. She gritted her teeth, ignoring the curious eyes of the crowd. Kelna was a diplomat, a representative of her species, the Ingenuity. She was here on a mission to bring peace to the Intergalactic Council, a mission that could prevent a devastating war. She could not afford to appear weak, yet her malfunctioning prosthetic was doing just that. The port was alive with activity. Merchants shouted about rare goods, travelers argued over docking fees, and automated drones buzzed overhead. Kelna tried to blend into the chaos, but her stuttering gait made her stand out. A child pointed at her leg, whispering to their parent. The parent quickly hushed them, but the damage was done. The shame was suffocating. She paused at a corner, leaning against a metal pillar to catch her breath. Her prosthetic whirred, a faint hum that should have been smooth but was now erratic. She pressed a button on her wrist device, trying to run a diagnostic. The screen blinked, flashing an error message. System override detected. Functionality compromised. Her heart sank. Override. That meant someone might have tampered with her prosthetics. But who? And why? The timer on her wrist reminded her she had less than 72 hours to reach the council meeting. Without her prosthetics working, the journey would be impossible. The Ingenuity homeworld was far from here, and calling for help would delay her mission. She had no allies in this sector, or so she thought. A voice interrupted her thoughts. Having trouble, Teneri. Kelna turned sharply, wincing as her leg locked up. A tall, scruffy human stood before her, his clothes mismatched and his face partially hidden under a hood. His piercing green eyes seemed to see right through her. "I don't need your help," she said firmly, masking her discomfort. The man smirked. "Sure you don't, but I couldn't help noticing." He pointed at her prosthetic. "That tech isn't working as it should. Fancy model, though. Probably alien grade. Too bad most engineers here wouldn't know where to start fixing it." Kelna narrowed her eyes. "What do you know about it?" "Enough to tell you it's not a hardware problem. Someone's messed with the software. Sabotage, if you ask me." He crossed his arms. "Name's Ethan Voss. Used to be an engineer, before things got complicated." Kelna didn't trust him. Humans were known for their resourcefulness, but also for their unpredictability. Yet something about his confidence struck a chord. She hated to admit it, but she needed help, and he seemed to know what he was talking about. "I don't have time for games, human. If you can fix it, say so. If not, leave me alone," she snapped. Ethan chuckled. "All right, diplomat. I can fix it, but it won't be cheap. And you'll owe me a favor." Kelna glared at him. "I don't deal in favors. Name your price." He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You've got access to places I don't. Information I might need someday. That's the price. Take it or leave it." The desperation in her situation left her no choice. "Fine, but if you double-cross me..." "Relax, lady. I'm not the double-crossing type. Not unless someone pays me more." He winked, then motioned for her to follow him. Kelna hesitated, then limped after him. They entered a small, dimly lit workshop tucked away in a quiet corner of the spaceport. The room was cluttered with tools, wires, and half-built gadgets. Ethan gestured for her to sit on a metal stool. "Let's see what we're dealing with," he said, kneeling to inspect her prosthetic. He pulled out a handheld device, its screen lighting up with complex code. His expression darkened as he scanned the data. "This isn't just sabotage," he muttered. "Whoever did this wanted you out of commission for good." Kelna frowned. "What do you mean?" Ethan looked up at her, his face unusually serious. "Your prosthetic isn't just malfunctioning. There's a kill switch embedded in the code. If I hadn't caught it, Your whole system would have shut down permanently. You'd be stranded. Her stomach tightened. This wasn't just a mechanical failure. Someone wanted her to fail, possibly to die. But who? And why? Ethan stood, his expression hardening. I'll fix it, but I need time, and you'll have to trust me. Kalina stared at him, the weight of her situation sinking in. For the first time, she felt truly vulnerable. But as much as she hated to rely on a human, she had no choice. Do it, she said finally, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. And don't make me regret this. Ethan smirked. Oh, you'll regret it. But not for the reasons you think. As he got to work, Kalina couldn't shake the feeling that her mission had just become far more dangerous than she ever imagined. A desperate search. Kalina's mind raced as she watched Ethan work on her prosthetic in his dimly lit workshop. The whir of tools and the occasional spark from his device filled the silence, but her thoughts were louder. Someone had sabotaged her, not just to humiliate her, but to stop her entirely. Her mission to the Intergalactic Council was critical, and failure wasn't an option. Ethan leaned back, wiping his hands on a grimy cloth. I've patched the worst of it, he said. You'll be able to walk, but this is a temporary fix. The kill switch is tied to a deeper system override. If we don't remove it completely, it'll activate again. Kalina frowned. How long do I have? 2 days. 3 if you're lucky, Ethan replied, his tone grim. But you need specialized equipment to fully repair this, and that's not something I can do here. Kalina felt a surge of frustration. Time was slipping away, and now she had to chase after a solution. Where can I find what I need? She asked sharply. Ethan hesitated. There's a human outpost a few systems away. They specialize in hybrid tech, alien and human designs. If anyone can help you, it's them. Kalina raised an eyebrow. Humans again. Do all of you meddle with alien technology? Ethan smirked. We're curious creatures, can't help but tinker with what we don't understand. Lucky for you, that curiosity might just save your life. Her instincts told her this was a risk, but she had no better options. She couldn't trust her own people, not when sabotage had come from someone within her faction. And now, she had to put her faith in humans, a species she had spent her career keeping at arm's length. Fine, she said, standing up. Her prosthetic moved more fluidly now, though she could feel the instability in its movements. Give me the coordinates. Ethan's expression turned serious. I'll give you the coordinates, but I'm coming with you. Kalina's eyes narrowed. Why? You've already been paid. Because whoever sabotaged you won't stop here, Ethan replied. If they realize you've survived, they'll come after you again. And trust me, you'll need someone who knows how to improvise. Kalina wanted to argue, but he wasn't wrong. She hated relying on him, but his expertise was invaluable. Do as you like, she said, feigning indifference. But I'm not slowing down for you. Ethan grinned. Wouldn't expect you to. The journey to the human outpost was tense. Kalina piloted her small starship, her eyes flicking between the controls and the vast expanse of space outside the cockpit. Ethan sat beside her, his feet propped up on the dashboard, completely at ease. You're awfully relaxed for someone caught in a conspiracy, Kalina said, unable to hide her irritation. Ethan shrugged. You get used to it. When you've worked with as many shady people as I have, nothing surprises you anymore. Kalina didn't respond. She was too focused on the task ahead, but Ethan's casual demeanor grated on her nerves. He didn't seem to grasp the gravity of the situation, or maybe he just didn't care. As they approached the outpost, an alarm blared in the cockpit. Kalina's heart skipped a beat. Incoming ships, he said, scanning the radar. They're locking onto us. Ethan leaned forward, his expression suddenly serious. Let me guess, your saboteurs sent them. Kalina's hands moved quickly over the controls, preparing the ship's defensive systems. They must have tracked us. Hold on. The attacking ships opened fire, and Kelna's vessel rocked violently as she dodged the blasts. Ethan grabbed the console to steady himself. "You're a diplomat. You fly like a smuggler." Kelna didn't have time to retort. She maneuvered the ship through a series of sharp turns, her focus unshakable. The outpost was just within reach, but the attackers were relentless. Ethan tapped on the console, pulling up the ship's weapon systems. "Do you mind if I even the odds a little?" "Do what you must," Kelna replied, her voice tense. Ethan grinned and activated the ship's lasers, firing back at their pursuers. His aim was precise, and one of the attacking ships exploded in a fiery burst. "Not bad for a human, huh?" Kelna ignored him, focusing on getting them to the outpost. Finally, they breached the outpost's defense perimeter. Automated turrets on the station fired at the remaining attackers, forcing them to retreat. Kelna let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Nice flying," Ethan said, leaning back in his seat. "Remind me not to get on your bad side." Kelna glared at him. "We're not safe yet. Let's find the technicians and get this over with." The outpost was a hub of human ingenuity, filled with towering machinery and bustling engineers. Kelna felt out of place among the chaos, but Ethan navigated it with ease. He led her to a workshop at the heart of the station, where an older human woman greeted them. "Ethan Voss," the woman said, raising an eyebrow. "Haven't seen you in years. What trouble are you in now?" "Not me, Amelia." "Her," Ethan replied, gesturing to Kelna. "She's got a piece of tech that's been sabotaged. Think you can help?" Amelia studied Kelna with keen eyes. "Sinister prosthetics. Advanced stuff. Let me take a look." As Amelia examined the prosthetic, Kelna couldn't shake the feeling that the danger was far from over. Whoever had tried to stop her wouldn't give up so easily. And now, she was entangled with humans who had their own secrets and agendas. But for now, survival was all that mattered. And for that, she had no choice but to trust them. The hidden sabotage. Kelna watched as Amelia worked on her prosthetic with the precision of an artist. The older human engineer's hands moved swiftly over the exposed wires and circuitry, her face calm but focused. Ethan leaned casually against the wall, watching the process unfold. Despite the calm atmosphere of the workshop, Kelna felt a storm brewing inside her. Sabotage wasn't just an inconvenience, it was an act of war. Whoever designed this prosthetic didn't make it easy for tampering, Amelia said, her voice steady as she examined the code. But whoever hacked it knew exactly where to hit. They bypassed multiple safeguards to plant a kill switch this deep. Kelna tensed. So this wasn't random. Amelia shook her head. Not even close. This was deliberate. Whoever did this wanted you immobilized, possibly worse. And they knew your tech inside out. Kelna clenched her fists. The saboteur had to be someone from her own faction. No one else had access to the level of technology embedded in her prosthetics. But who could she trust if the betrayal came from within? Ethan walked over and peered at the holographic display Amelia was projecting. "What's that?" he asked, pointing to a cluster of data logs. Amelia frowned. "Looks like activity logs from her prosthetics interface. They show every connection it's made in the past month." Ethan's eyebrows rose. "Then we got ourselves a trail. If we can pinpoint when the override was uploaded, we might figure out who did it." Kelna stepped closer, her voice sharp. "Can you do it?" Amelia hesitated. "I can try, but whoever planted this didn't leave an obvious trace. It'll take time." Kelna's patience was wearing thin. "We don't have time." Ethan smirked. "You've Scenery always this charming under pressure." She shot him a glare, but didn't reply. Ethan turned back to Amelia. "Work fast. If they've tracked us this far, they'll come after her again." As Amelia dug into the logs, Kelna paced the workshop. Her thoughts were a whirlwind of suspicion and fear. Who would want to sabotage her mission? The Scenery were divided, with factions pushing for war against the humans, but she had always believed the leadership was unified and seeking peace. Clearly, She had been wrong. Found something, Amelia announced after what felt like an eternity. Helena stopped pacing and hurried over. Amelia pointed at the display. The override was uploaded 5 days ago. The connection came from a Xenari diplomatic vessel, a ship registered to your own fleet. Helena's breath caught. Someone on her team, someone she had trusted, had done this. Can you trace it further? Narrow it down to an individual. Amelia shook her head. The connection was masked. Whoever did this knew how to cover their tracks. Ethan leaned in, studying the data, but not completely. See this fragment here? He pointed to a string of code. It's a user ID. They didn't wipe it clean. Amateur mistake. Helena felt a flicker of hope. Can you decode it? Already on it, Ethan said, pulling out a portable device and connecting it to the display. He worked quickly, his fingers flying over the controls. Within minutes, the screen blinked, revealing a name. Helena's stomach dropped. She knew the name. It was Velter, her second in command and closest ally. Velter, she whispered, disbelief and anger mixing in her voice. It can't be. He's been with me for years. He's loyal. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Apparently not. You don't plant a kill switch in your boss's prosthetic out of loyalty. Helena's mind reeled. Velter had been at her side through countless negotiations, always supporting her push for peace. But the evidence was undeniable. He had betrayed her, and not just her, but the very cause they had fought for together. What do we do now? Amelia asked, looking between Helena and Ethan. Helena took a deep breath, forcing herself to focus. We continue. The council meeting is in less than 2 days, and I can't let this sabotage stop me. The fate of countless lives depends on this mission. Ethan crossed his arms. And what about Velter? You think he's just gonna sit back and let you show up? Helena's jaw tightened. No, he'll try to stop me again. But this time, I'll be ready. The workshop door burst open, cutting their conversation short. A group of armed mercenaries stormed in, weapons drawn. Their leader, a tall figure clad in black armor, stepped forward. Helena of the Xenari, he said, his voice cold and mechanical. You're coming with us. Helena didn't hesitate. She lunged for cover, drawing a concealed blade from her belt. Ethan grabbed a nearby wrench, clearly improvising, while Amelia ducked behind her workbench. You're a popular target, Ethan muttered, swinging the wrench at an approaching mercenary. Helena focused on the leader, her movements precise despite the instability in her prosthetic. She needed to end this quickly. As the battle raged, her prosthetic began to sputter, the temporary fix failing under the strain. Ethan, she shouted, I need backup. He tossed aside his makeshift weapon and grabbed a plasma pistol from one of the fallen mercenaries. On it, together, they fought off the attackers, but it was clear they were outnumbered. Just as things seemed dire, Amelia activated an emergency system in the workshop. A blinding flash of light disoriented the mercenaries, giving them the upper hand. When the dust settled, Helena was breathing heavily, her prosthetic barely functioning. Ethan helped her to her feet. You all right? I will be, she said, though her voice was strained. She turned to Amelia. How long will the repairs take? Amelia hesitated. A few hours, if I'm uninterrupted. Helena nodded. Then we'd better prepare. Velter won't stop here. He knows I'm coming for him. Ethan smirked. This just got interesting. Helena didn't respond. Her mind was set on one thing: survival and justice. Uneasy alliance. The silence in the workshop was tense as Helena sat on the edge of the workbench, her prosthetic temporarily stabilized, but far from reliable. Her gaze was fixed on the floor, her mind racing with thoughts of betrayal and the mission that hung by a thread. Ethan leaned casually against the wall, his sharp green eyes watching her like a hawk. Amelia worked quietly in the background, dismantling components of the sabotaged prosthetic to prepare for a deeper repair. "You're awfully quiet for someone whose life is falling apart," Ethan said, breaking the silence with his signature smirk. Kelna looked up sharply. "I don't need commentary from a human who barely knows me." Ethan shrugged. "Fair enough. But let me guess. You're wondering how long your buddy Valter has been playing you, and how many more traps he's set for you." Kelna's jaw tightened. She hated how easily he could read her. "Valter is a traitor. That much is clear. But if you think I'm going to sit here and let him win, you don't know me at all." Ethan chuckled. "That's the spirit. But let's not pretend this is going to be easy. Whoever's backing Valter clearly has deep pockets and a long reach. Those mercenaries weren't your average thugs." Kelna stood, her movements stiff as her prosthetics strained against her willpower. "I've faced worse, and I'll deal with him myself." Ethan straightened, his tone shifting to something more serious. "No, you won't. Not alone. You need someone watching your back. And like it or not, that's me." She glared at him. "Why are you so eager to help? What's in this for you?" He smirked again, but this time there was something darker behind his eyes. "Let's just say I've got my own reasons for wanting to see this through. Call it professional curiosity, or a grudge." Kelna studied him for a moment. There was more to this human than he let on, but she didn't have the time or energy to pry. She needed all the help she could get, even if it came from someone as infuriating as Ethan. "Fine," she said finally. "But if you slow me down, I'll leave you behind." Ethan grinned. Wouldn't expect anything less. The journey to the council's location was fraught with tension. The sleek corridors of Kelna's diplomatic ship felt smaller with Ethan on board, his human energy clashing with the stoic scenery aesthetic. He wandered the halls, inspecting the alien technology with a mix of curiosity and mischief, while Kelna prepared for what lay ahead. "You really trust this ship to get us there in one piece?" Ethan asked, poking at a console in the cockpit. Kelna rolled her eyes. "This vessel has seen more battles than you can imagine. It'll hold." "Good to know," Ethan replied, "because something tells me Valter isn't done with us yet." As if on cue, an alert blared from the ship's systems. Kelna spun in her chair, her fingers flying over the controls. "We've got company." Ethan leaned over her shoulder, scanning the display. 2 ships, fast and armed. "Let me guess. Valter's goons." "Most likely," Kelna muttered. "Strap in. This isn't going to be a smooth ride." Ethan grinned. "You fly like a maniac. I'm looking forward to it." Kelna ignored him, focusing on maneuvering the ship as the attackers closed in. Laser fire lit up the void of space as she weaved through enemy fire with practiced precision. Ethan manned the ship's weapons, firing back with surprising accuracy. "Not bad for a human," Kelna admitted grudgingly as he scored a direct hit on one of the ships. "Don't sound so surprised," Ethan replied, his tone smug. "Humans are full of surprises." Despite their efforts, the second ship managed to clip one of their engines. Kelna cursed under her breath as alarms blared throughout the cockpit. "We're losing power. Brace for impact." Ethan barely had time to strap in before the ship lurched violently, the stars outside the viewport spinning as they plummeted toward the surface of a nearby moon. Kelna fought the controls, her prosthetic straining against the force, until the ship finally skidded to a halt in a cloud of dust and debris. "Everyone alive?" Kelna asked, her voice tight, as she unstrapped herself. "Define alive," Ethan groaned, rubbing his shoulder. "That was one hell of a landing." Kelna ignored him, already checking the damage. "We need to repair the engine before we can leave, but first, we need to deal with whoever's coming after us." Ethan peered out of the cracked viewport. Too late. Looks like they're already here. A squad of heavily armed soldiers was approaching the wreckage, their weapons gleaming under the moon's dim light. Kelna grabbed her blade, her expression fierce. "Stay behind me. I'll handle this." Ethan snorted. "Not a chance. You're good, but you're not invincible. Let's even the odds." Together, they stepped out of the wreckage, their movements synchronized despite their differences. The approaching soldiers raised their weapons, but Kelna and Ethan were ready. The battle that followed was brutal, a chaotic dance of blade and blaster, but they fought with determination, driven by the same goal: survival. When the last soldier fell, Kelna turned to Ethan, her chest heaving with exertion. "You fight better than I expected." Ethan grinned, wiping the streak of dirt from his face. "And you're not half as bad as you think I think you are." Kelna rolled her eyes but couldn't suppress a small smile. For the first time, she felt a flicker of trust toward this infuriating human. They were an unlikely team, but together they might just have a chance at exposing Valter's treachery and completing her mission. "Let's fix this ship and finish what we started," she said firmly. Ethan nodded. "Lead the way, diplomat." And for the first time in a long while, Kelna felt a spark of hope. The saboteur unmasked. The ship's engine hummed softly as Kelna and Ethan approached the Council's planet. Amelia's repairs had held, and the vessel now glided through the void with quiet precision. But the atmosphere on board was anything but calm. Kelna sat in the cockpit, her mind replaying the evidence against Valter over and over. The betrayal gnawed at her, fueling her determination to confront him. Ethan sauntered in, a steaming cup of something vaguely resembling coffee in hand. "You're going to burn a hole through the dashboard if you keep staring at it like that," he quipped. Kelna didn't look up. "Valter was my closest ally. We fought side by side for years. I trusted him with everything." "Yeah, betrayal sucks," Ethan said casually, sliding into the seat beside her. "But trust me, stewing on it won't help. You need to focus on the next move." Kelna turned to face him, her eyes sharp. "And what would you suggest, human? March into the council chambers and accuse him in front of everyone?" Ethan smirked. "Not quite. If you're going to take down someone that powerful, you need more than accusations. You need undeniable proof." Kelna raised an eyebrow. "The data logs are proof enough." "Maybe for you," Ethan replied, leaning back. "But politicians, they'll want something irrefutable. A smoking gun. Something that leaves no room for doubt." Kelna hated to admit it, but he was right. The council would need more than circumstantial evidence to act against Valter. And if they didn't believe her, the consequences could be catastrophic, not just for her, but for everyone counting on her mission to succeed. As they landed on the council's planet, the tension between them was palpable. The sprawling cityscape stretched out before them, gleaming towers piercing the sky and bustling streets teeming with activity. The council chambers were located at the heart of the city, a towering structure surrounded by heavy security. Ethan adjusted the strap of the bag slung over his shoulder, its contents a mix of tools and makeshift weapons. "So what's the plan, boss?" Kelna hesitated. She had always operated with precision and clarity, but the betrayal had shaken her confidence. "We confront Valter. He'll slip up when faced with the evidence." Ethan shook his head. "You're underestimating him. If he's smart enough to sabotage you, he's smart enough to prepare for this moment. He'll have a counterplan, maybe even frame you. We need to hit him where it hurts." Kelna's gaze hardened. "And where exactly would that be?" Ethan grinned. "In his secrets. Everyone has them. And someone like Valter probably has plenty. Let's dig up some dirt." The city was a labyrinth of towering buildings and shadowy alleys. Ethan led Kelna through the back streets, avoiding the watchful eyes of the council's security forces. He had a contact here, someone who thrived in the underbelly of society, a human hacker named Rin. If anyone could uncover Valter's hidden dealings, it was her. They arrived at a nondescript building, its exterior plain and unassuming. Ethan knocked on the door in a specific rhythm, and a moment later it creaked open. "Voss." A young woman with wild neon-colored hair greeted, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Still alive, I see. What do you want?" "Good to see you too, Rin," Ethan replied. "We need a favor, big one." Rin's sharp eyes shifted to Kelna, taking in her alien features and the gleaming prosthetic. Interesting company you're keeping these days. Come in. Inside, Rin's workspace was a chaotic mess of wires, screens, and half-finished gadgets. Kelna felt out of place, but Ethan seemed at home. So, who's the target? Rin asked, settling into her chair and spinning it lazily. Valter, Ethan replied. High-ranking Xenari diplomat. We need to dig up everything. Hidden accounts, secret meetings, anything incriminating. Rin raised an eyebrow. You're aiming high. What's the payout? Survival, Kelna said firmly. If we fail, millions will die in a war we're trying to prevent. Rin shrugged. All right, I'll bite. Let's see what we can find. Her fingers danced over the keyboard, the room filled with the soft hum of machinery. Minutes turned into hours as Rin delved into encrypted files and shadowy networks. Finally, she leaned back, a satisfied grin on her face. Bingo, she said, spinning her chair to face them. Your guy's been busy. Secret meetings with arms dealers, hidden accounts on neutral planets, and enough bribes to buy half the council. Looks like he's been pushing for war to line his own pockets. Kelna felt a mix of anger and vindication. Can you compile it into a format the council can't ignore? Already done, Rin said, sliding a data chip across the table. This will blow his whole operation wide open. Ethan picked up the chip and gave her a nod. You're a lifesaver. Rin. Don't forget it, she replied with a wink. Now get out of here before someone traces this back to me. Armed with the evidence, Kelna and Ethan made their way to the council chambers. The grand hall was filled with diplomats and officials, their voices a low murmur as they prepared for the meeting. Kelna scanned the room, her eyes locking onto Valter. He stood near the center, his expression calm and confident, as though he hadn't a care in the galaxy. Kelna clenched her fists. It's time. Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder. Remember, stick to the facts. Let the evidence speak for itself. Kelna nodded and stepped forward, ready to face her betrayer. The final showdown. The Grand Council chamber was a spectacle of authority and power. The room, an intricate blend of Xenari architecture and alien technologies, loomed vast and imposing. Its central dais glowed faintly, encircled by floating platforms where diplomats from dozens of species sat, their collective murmurs a quiet storm of anticipation. Kelna stood at the edge of the chamber, her heart steady, but her mind sharp. Today would decide everything: peace, war, and the survival of countless lives. Ethan stood beside her, blending into the shadows of the chamber's entrance. Despite his casual demeanor, his eyes scanned the room like a predator hunting its prey. He leaned close to Kelna and whispered, "You're sure about this?" Calling him out in public like this is going to make a lot of people uncomfortable. Kelna didn't flinch. Good. Let them squirm. If they see the truth, they'll have no choice but to act. Ethan smirked. Just remember, Valter probably has a few tricks up his sleeve. He won't go down without a fight. Kelna nodded, adjusting her prosthetic leg as she took a step forward. The temporary fixes held for now, but she could feel the strain beneath the surface. The kill switch embedded deep within the system loomed like a ticking time bomb. The chamber quieted as Kelna stepped onto the central dais. The platform's soft glow illuminated her figure, highlighting the resolve etched into her face. She addressed the assembly, her voice firm and clear. Honored members of the Intergalactic Council, she began, her tone commanding respect. I come before you today not just as a diplomat of the Xenari, but as a representative of all those who believe in peace. A grave conspiracy threatens the harmony we have fought so hard to maintain. The murmurs began immediately, diplomats exchanging glances and whispers. Valter, seated on one of the higher platforms, raised a brow but kept his expression neutral. He leaned forward, feigning concern. Kelna, what is the meaning of this? We are here to discuss unity, not wild accusations. Kelna's gaze locked onto his. Unity cannot exist when treachery festers among us. She raised a small device, projecting a holographic display into the center of the chamber. The gathered diplomats leaned in as images, logs, and financial records flickered to life. Kaelna narrated each piece of evidence, her voice unwavering. "These are records of secret dealings," she said, her finger pointing at the hologram. "Velter has been meeting with arms dealers, funneling bribes, and orchestrating events to push us into war. His sabotage of my prosthetics was merely one step in a larger plan to eliminate opposition." The room erupted into chaos. Accusations and denials flew, voices overlapping in a cacophony of outrage. Velter stood, his face a mask of feigned indignation. "This is an absurd fabrication. You dare to defame me with these baseless claims." Kaelna met his glare with cold determination. "The evidence speaks for itself. Or would you care to explain the untraceable accounts and encrypted communications tied directly to you?" Velter's composure cracked for a fraction of a second, but he quickly recovered. "This is a desperate attempt to divert attention from your failures. Do not let her deceive you." Suddenly, the lights in the chamber flickered. Kaelna's prosthetic emitted a faint whir, and she felt the telltale strain of the kill switch reactivating. Her heart raced as her legs seized up, nearly causing her to collapse. Ethan was at her side in an instant, his hand steadying her. "Looks like your buddy's pulling out all the stops," Ethan muttered. "Give me a second. I'll override it." "No," Kaelna whispered. "We don't have time. He'll escape if we don't act now." Ethan's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Then stall him. I'll keep you standing if it comes to that." Kaelna turned back to the council, forcing herself to remain upright. Velter's desperation speaks volumes. He knows the truth is out, and now he seeks to silence me again. Before Velter could respond, a loud clang echoed through the chamber. A squad of armed enforcers burst through the doors, their weapons trained on Kaelna. Velter's voice rang out, dripping with false authority. "Detain her. She is a traitor to the Xenari people." The council erupted into chaos again, some members demanding answers while others shouted for order. Kaelna drew a blade from her belt, ready to defend herself, but Ethan stepped in front of her. "Not today, buddy," Ethan said, drawing a plasma pistol. "You want her. You'll have to go through me first." The enforcers hesitated, their weapons trained on the pair. Before they could act, the chamber's security system activated, sealing the doors and disabling the enforcers' weapons. A new voice rang out, a council elder, her tone sharp and commanding. "Enough," she declared, silencing the room. "This chamber is a place of diplomacy, not violence. Velter, you will explain these accusations immediately." Velter opened his mouth, but before he could speak, the elder raised a hand. "And you will do so under full truth verification protocols." The color drained from Velter's face. The protocols were infallible, designed to detect even the slightest falsehood. He looked around the chamber, searching for an escape, but there was none. As the verification process began, Kaelna felt the strain in her leggies slightly. Ethan had managed to stabilize the system just enough to keep her standing. She glanced at him, gratitude flickering in her eyes. "You've got a knack for showing up at the right moment," she said quietly. Ethan grinned. "And you've got a knack for stirring up trouble." The elder's voice cut through the tension. "The evidence is clear. Velter, you are hereby stripped of your position and placed under arrest. The council will investigate your actions thoroughly." Velter glared at Kaelna, his composure finally shattered. "This isn't over," he hissed as security escorted him out. Kaelna straightened, the weight of the moment settling on her shoulders. She had won, but the fight wasn't truly over. There were still wounds to heal, alliances to rebuild, and a galaxy to protect. Ethan clapped her on the shoulder. "Not bad, diplomat. Not bad at all." Kaelna allowed herself a small smile. "Let's hope the council chooses peace. Otherwise, this was only the beginning." Humanity's touch. The aftermath of the council session was a blur. Kelna had delivered her evidence, exposed Velter, and survived his desperate attempt to silence her. Yet, as she stood on the steps of the council chambers, staring out at the sprawling alien metropolis below, the weight of the mission lingered heavy on her shoulders. The council had adjourned in chaos, many members retreating to their private chambers to deliberate the implications of Velter's treachery. The galaxy was at a crossroads, teetering between peace and war, and Kelna knew her role wasn't over yet. Ethan leaned against the ornate railing beside her, his casual posture a sharp contrast to the storm raging within her. "You did it," he said, his tone unusually serious. "Did I?" Kelna replied, her voice tinged with doubt. "Velter is gone, but his supporters remain. His corruption ran deep. There are others like him, profiting from conflict. Stopping one traitor isn't enough." Ethan shrugged, the hint of a smile tugging at his lips. "Maybe not, but you took the first step. Sometimes, that's all it takes to start a chain reaction. You've shown them the truth. Now it's up to them to act." Kelna turned to face him, her eyes searching his face. For all his irreverence and unpredictability, Ethan had proven himself to be an ally, a rare one. She still didn't fully trust him, but she couldn't deny the impact he'd had on her mission. "Why did you help me?" she asked, the question burning in her mind since the moment they'd met. "You had no reason to get involved. You could have walked away at any time." Ethan's smirk faded, replaced by a rare moment of vulnerability. "Let's just say I've seen what happens when people like Velter get their way. Lost people I cared about. Good people. Helping you? Maybe it's my way of making sure that doesn't happen again." Kelna studied him for a moment before nodding. "Thank you, Ethan, for everything." He grinned, the moment of seriousness passing like a fleeting shadow. "Don't get all sentimental on me, diplomat. You're not done yet." Hours later, Kelna was summoned back to the council chambers. The hall was quieter now, the earlier chaos replaced with a somber stillness. The council elders sat in their elevated seats, their expressions grave. Kelna stepped onto the central dais, her prosthetic leg steady despite the strain of the day. She had worked with Amelia to stabilize the kill switch further, buying herself time until permanent repairs could be made. Ethan stood at the back of the chamber, watching silently. "Kelna of the Ingenuity," the lead elder began, her voice echoing through the vast hall. "Your bravery and dedication to peace have been noted. The evidence you presented has shaken the very foundation of this council, but it has also provided us with clarity." Kelna inclined her head, her expression neutral. "What is your decision, honored elders?" The elder hesitated, a rare display of uncertainty. "The council is divided. Some believe war is inevitable, that the damage done by Velter and his allies cannot be undone. Others believe we must redouble our efforts for peace, using your evidence as a catalyst for change." Kelna's heart sank. Division was dangerous. It left room for chaos, for manipulation by those who sought to profit from conflict. "You must act swiftly," she said, her voice firm. "Velter's arrest is only the beginning. If we hesitate, others will fill the void he left behind. Peace requires strength, unity, and decisive action." The elder nodded slowly. "Your words carry weight, Kelna. We will reconvene tomorrow to cast our final vote. Until then, you are free to speak with the other delegates, should you wish to rally support for your cause." Kelna bowed. "Thank you, honored elders. I will do everything in my power to ensure peace prevails." Kelna spent the night moving from chamber to chamber, speaking with delegates from across the galaxy. Each conversation was a delicate dance of diplomacy, her words chosen carefully to sway those still on the fence. Ethan followed her silently, offering the occasional quip to lighten the mood, but mostly staying out of her way. As dawn broke over the city, Kelna returned to her quarters, exhaustion weighing heavily on her. Ethan was waiting for her, a cup of human coffee in hand. "You look like you've been through a war already," he said, handing her the cup. "It feels like it," Kelna replied, taking the sip. The bitter drink was surprisingly invigorating. But I think we made progress. Many of the delegates seemed receptive to my arguments. Ethan nodded. Good. Let's hope they see reason. Otherwise, all this might have been for nothing. Kelna's prosthetic leg whirred softly as she sat down, the temporary fixes holding but fragile. She glanced at Ethan. What will you do after this, once the vote is cast? He smirked. Depends. If you win, maybe I'll stick around, help clean up the mess Valter left behind. If you lose, well, I'm pretty good at surviving chaos. Kelna shook her head, a small smile breaking through her exhaustion. You're impossible, Ethan Voss. And you're stubborn, Kelna of the Xenari, he replied, raising his cup in a mock toast. Guess we make a good team. The final vote was cast the next day, and the council's decision was announced. Peace. The room erupted in a mix of cheers and relieved sighs. Kelna stood at the center, a quiet sense of triumph washing over her. The galaxy wasn't saved, not yet, but it had been given a chance. As she stepped off the dais, Ethan was waiting for her, his signature grin in place. Told you you'd pull it off. Kelna nodded. We pulled it off. He tilted his head. You're learning. Maybe there's hope for you yet. Kelna allowed herself a rare laugh. Perhaps. Now let's see if we can make peace last. And together, they stepped into the unknown, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead.